Yinka, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show, Dr. V.
I'm excited to have you on. I know we were just talking a little bit. I know you are someone who discusses a lot about excellence and how to do that and how to create that. And I'm just excited to dive in, pick your brain, and learn your systems and what you do and how you help people with that. So thanks for taking the time, but more importantly, thanks for taking the time to share it with all of us here at the Mindful Experiment. My listeners already know I'm not going to mess around, so I want to get right into this. Tell me your story. How did you get into what you're doing? What inspired you to focus on excellence and leadership and all the things that you're doing?
Right. Yes. So my story goes all the way back to, I will say, 2002, 2004. So I moved to the United States from England, where I did my undergrad in 2001. And shortly after that, I started grad school. Right before I finished grad school, business school, I had a great job lined up with one of the largest investment banks in the world. It was a dream role, and all was well. So as soon as I was done with grad school, started working in this financial services organization. I loved working in that space. All was well. And then I worked in the financial services space from 2004 up until 2009, when the Great Recession hit. And I don't know if you remember, but the financial services sector was one of the hardest hit sectors back then. So I lost my job. Well, everyone in my department really did. I found I was heavily pregnant with my second child. My husband and I were with my second child. Shortly before then, we just purchased a home as well. So I found myself without a job, and all of those different factors coupled together, but on a deep sense of anxiety. I didn't know a lot of what I know now. So I just found myself in this pit of just hopelessness, not even knowing how to move forward or what to do. All I could just envision was the worst. The worst. I kept thinking, oh, we're gonna, end up homeless, and just the worst of the worst. My husband would say to me, it'll be fine. We'll work our way through this. I couldn't even see past, what the day by day. So it was at a routine pregnancy checkup. I went to the OBGYN. And I remember on this particular day, I think I was about 8 months along, something like that, 7.5 months. And so after, checking all the vitals and everything, so he pulled me into his office, and he had this puzzled look on his face. And I thought, oh, what? And he was like, sit down, just sit down. So he sat there, and he goes, what is going on? And I thought, I had everything well covered. I was like, nothing. He was like, no, there's something going on. And he said to me, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to stop. He said, you need to stop. So I was like, well, there's nothing going on. Everything's been fine. And then he looked me square in the face. He said to me, Yinka, your stress levels are through the roof. You just need to stop what you're doing. And he said, I would hate for you to develop severe complications this far along in your pregnancy. Dr. Vic, that was a wake-up call. The last night I thought, I said, with everything else going on, I do not want to lose my baby. I don't want to add on to that. And I remember, just driving home from that visit, and I have to, let me add this. So what the doctor didn't know, or what I thought I had masked very well, was I've been waking up in the middle of the night, just sweating profusely, just worrying, and then, just trying to figure things out. And then I would go back to bed and just, carry on as if there was nothing. And I thought I had that well covered, but no, like my body and everything else was showing otherwise. So on the ride home that day, I just had to deeply reflect, and that reflection carried on for the next couple of days, literally. And I remember just saying to myself that I do not want to ever find myself in this situation again, ever. And I didn't know how, I didn't have answers, but I just knew that I would do better. So I remember just basically just focusing heavily on, self-development, personal development. And it's been a journey that has carried on from 2009 up until today. And it was during that time, on that journey, that I found clarity, that I realized that my self-worth back then, my self-worth was defined by the status, by, the degrees, the roles, how much I earned. And then when that was stripped away from me, it was nothing. I had nothing to define myself by. It was on that journey that I found, that I discovered the principles of excellence that I, now teach my clients, that I still apply to my life on a daily basis, just because I know that they work. And it was, during that time as well, on that journey, that I found my company, Ways of Excellence. And that has brought me to where I am today. Just basically, the biggest takeaway from all of that was just that, just doing better, the principles, the disciplines, the habits of excellence that I discovered over time, applying them to my life, to my family, my relationships, and just seeing the results. And I've gone ahead to apply those principles to change lives, change businesses. So yes, that's how I got to where I am today.
I love your story. I've been there. I know your feelings. I know where every day you're just looking at what's in front instead of the long-term vision. So I commend you with that. It takes a lot of grit and a lot of trust with self, would you say, in that essence? Because you had that wake up call, right? Doctor tells you this, you're like, okay, enough of this. And then you have to depend on something, right? Because your whole world was shattered to a degree. And when I say whole world, I mean, our mind has constructs that believe, or your brain has some people call it the ego, but it's a construct that says, hey, this is life. This is how life is. This is what you're supposed to do. And this is like cultural programming is what I call it. Like you said, you have to have the degrees and this and that, and I know exactly how that feels. And then when that becomes not true, then you're like, your body, you go into a state of fear, because it's like, wait a minute, this is what it was all about. And then you have to self-create yourself in a different way. What was the first step you started to take? I know you talked about excellence and things like that, but what was something that you kind of said, I know for myself, when my journey was financial in a sense, and I started a business, I had a vision, everything was going well. I was trying to get things up and running. I didn't have funds to start the business. I didn't have, I'm starting my chiropractic business. I took $250,000 in debt and for school and all the other stuff. And then I'm like, okay, how I got to make this work somehow. And long story short, it came to a point where I had to make a decision and ended up going bankrupt. But long story short, it's one of those things where I knew, like you said, I'm never going to come back here again. Like, I'm going to make this a teaching moment. And then from there, I had to look and say, okay, well, what can I depend on? What is something that I can look at within and say, well, this is what I'm going to focus on, and I'm just going to go all in. But did you have that kind of a moment, or was it something where it was like, how did you, what was the first thing or multiple things that you had to depend on to say, here's the path of excellence, here's how I'm going to go that route?
Right. That's a great question, Dr. Vic. So I think for me, a couple of factors, a couple of components played a big role to getting me to where I am right now. So I'll say one of the first things was, I'm a person of faith. I believe a lot on the teachings of the Bible, teachings of Jesus Christ. So I leaned in heavily into my faith during that time, because I found hope. I could lean on those promises. I was just like, okay, well, this is what the word says. I'm just going to let this play out in my life. And so I was able to really lean in to my faith, I read the Bible heavily during that time. And then I think finances, just like you, finances was a big one, because there was no financial discipline whatsoever. Like, earning all this money and we just spending it as fast as we could. Like, we didn't really. My husband is more frugal, but we didn't have the kind of financial, the foundation, the disciplines that we have now. So I know the first thing for me was, okay, everything that was learnable, everything that we could learn to make us better financial stewards, we would learn it. So we took courses, we read books, and we did all of this together. We read books and all of that. And then I realized that, okay, so as I improved on one area of my life and pulled out the principles, and I'm like, oh, okay, I could move on to another area of life and apply that, and moved on to, health, for example. Just, there's so many studies, I'm sure you probably know this, that it doesn't, even 20 minutes of exercise a day, for example, will make you feel great for the next 12 hours. And it was just, just that ripple effect. So big part of it, my faith, and then just applying the principles to different areas of life.
I love that. Faith and discipline is basically what I'm hearing from you. And
Yes.
then so how did you, because, a lot of times, I hear Tony Robbins say this, right? You can take all my money, you can take everything away from me, but then eventually at the end of the day, I still have my voice and I'll come back. And
Right.
it's one of those things that, some people hear that because some people sometimes, and this was my negative limited belief system on money was is like, well, people have money. It's just their luck. They just end up, they're just lucky. And that's how the luck leans towards them until I had to create my own world and my own wealth. And then it was like, okay, it's all on me. It's what I'm doing. It's the work I'm doing that makes this happen. So what are some of the things that, what are some of those habits that you started to develop to lead to the excellence in your life to what you wanted to see? What was that beginning point or what's the starting point, or what is like some of those habits that you would recommend someone who's listening and they may be in somewhat of a similar situation that you were in, and what are some things that you can say, okay, this is how I help individuals to a certain degree create habits to create excellence? Because I'm throwing a couple questions here all at once, because would you also agree that anyone can have excellence? It's not luck. It's not just a choice. And it's not chance. It's more of a choice.
It's definitely a choice. You have to be deliberate. You have to be intentional about becoming a person of excellence. So actually, I wrote them down so I wouldn't, because this question comes up a lot. So sometimes I forget some, but this time around, I wrote everything down. All right. So I'll say one of the first, I guess, discipline, so to speak, is choosing to be the best where you are right now. For me, it wasn't the journey back to where I am right now. And it's still a journey. It wasn't a linear one. There were so many humbling experiences along the way, even with all the degrees and certification, it still took a while to get back to where we are right now. But one of the things that I learned, the very first thing that I learned was wherever you are, just choose to be your best there. Why? Because there are universal principles. A lot of my disciplines are biblically based, but then a lot of them are universal principles as well. You don't even have to be a believer. You don't have to be a person of faith. But these principles, if you apply them, they work. Irrespective, they work. So, say for example, maybe you have an MBA or whatever, you're very well accomplished. And then for whatever reason, you find yourself in this position that you know that is way beneath you, but for whatever the circumstances are at that time, that's where you are. You know what? Be the best you are then. Because what you're doing is it's almost as though you're sowing seeds in just a matter of time. So it's almost as though once you pass that test, then you'll be entrusted with more. So just being the best of where you are, wherever you find yourself, even if you find yourself at the pinnacle of success, be the best leader. And it's not just, saying it. Just look for ways to do that. Go read books, be skilled at what you do, but just be the very best at what you do. I'm just going to share just a very quick story, if that's okay with you, Dr. Vic, that analyzes this very well. All right. So I'm sure you're familiar with, David, the popular King David. So right before he became the popular king that he's known to be now, he was a shepherd. He was a lowly shepherd. He was the last of 8 brothers. His father, sent him to take care of the family's, the sheep and cows and whatnot. But, while he was there, he had a penchant for playing the harp, and he was just very good at what he did. And unknown to him, though, he was being watched, but he didn't know that. He did his job, his lowly job. He did it very, very well. But then there was a time when the sitting king at the time, King Saul, he had some kind of mental issues. And his attendants said to him that, if we can find someone that can play the harp very well, that might soothe you. And then the king agreed to them looking for someone. Do you know the attendants these are the senior advisors of the king? Even before the words even finished coming out of the king's mouth, one of the attendants said, something, I know someone. He said, I know someone. He said, his name is David. And then he just went down his resume, basically. And it was like, and as soon as it was done, the king was like, yes, I want to meet this person. Go get that person. But, David didn't know that this man, I'm guessing maybe, on his way home, he passes by where David watches the flock of sheep or whatever. We don't know. We're not told that. But this man had been watching him for a while. So he knew he was a person of excellence. He knew that he was someone worthy enough to stand before and work for a king. So, yes, and I've seen that play out over and over and over and over again in my own life. So that's number one. Number two, the motives for why you do what you do. I had to get to a place of where I like, what is my why? At the time, I had no why. That's why when the rug was pulled from underneath me, I had no sense of identity. So I had to redefine myself. I had to get to a place of where I knew that I was enough. And why do I do what I do? Because I want to set a new standard, not just for myself, but for my kids, for my family, a standard of excellence. There are different ways of doing things, but there's an excellent way of doing things. And the excellent way, as far as I'm concerned, is the better way. That's the way that I've seen yield results for me, and I know, and for others as well. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but those are two examples of disciplines that helped.
I think the story you shared with David and King Saul and all that stuff is absolutely, it brings to presence a lot of times in the world today. I talk a lot about, don't be a one-hit wonder. Be one of those artists that are like a Michael Jackson, like the Beatles. Like the Beatles are, 50 years ago they played, 50 years ago. And still to the day, I talk to when I work with kids in the office, and I'll be like, the Beatles, 6, 8-year-old. Yeah, I know the Beatles. I know Michael Jackson. I'm like, they're not even here anymore, and yet they're still continuing on. And I think that's the story where you just, it's about like, you're just focusing long term rather than short term. And I see that a lot in today's era where it's like, how fast can I make a short term tweak? How can I fast make the short term? And instead, it's like, hey, if you just focus on the long term, yeah, you may not get that fast success. You may not get there quick, but you'll have long-term success where it just all of a sudden will work out for you, and where you build that solid foundation because you know your why. I can feel that. I know the listeners are listening to you and they can hear that. It's that deep conviction, like, this is why I do what I do. I'm setting an example, not just for myself, my kids. That's your legacy there. And so I love that. So that's when you're looking at that, it's so just to sum that all up, then it's basically, you have to focus on something, do something, and do your best at that no matter what, right? I love when you said that, because to me, that's acceptance, right? You're accepting, and tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just interpreting what you're saying. And it's like you're accepting where you are and say, this is where I'm at right now. And this is the best I'm going to do at this moment. And then everything else will, as long as I keep doing that, I'm planting my seeds, and my harvest will eventually come one day.
Right. And I just want to add to that as well. Yes, it's acceptance, but it's not just so much, this is what I'm doing right now, and this is it. It's what you said about having that long-term view as well. Just, and going back to the story of David, and he had his brothers all served. They were all soldiers. They were, highly decorated soldiers. And I'm sure he probably felt, slighted, like everyone else, everyone had the honorable roles, but then he was the one that had like the, like the lowliest of the lowliest of roles, but he didn't let discontentment set in. He just thought, okay, this is where I am right now. I know that I'm made for more, but while I'm here, I'll do my best. And it was so funny because I talked about this the other day. I made a post about this the other day, where I was, how I was on social media, and I stumbled upon a page of a lady that I admire greatly. And sometimes if you're not careful, if you don't gather a heart, I find myself thinking, like I have all these lofty dreams and whatnot. It just feels like it's taking forever. But I had to quickly catch myself. I had to guard against ingratitude and discontent, because I know how far we have come from, and I also know that. I know better. I know that, I can't compare my level 4 or chapter 4 to someone else's chapter 20. There's no shortcut to it. Like, it's a process. So I was sharing this the other day. I said, so yes, what I'm going to do, which I've always done, is I'm going to celebrate those at their level 30. I'm going to learn from them, celebrate them. But what I'm not going to do is allow discontentment or ingratitude or any of that to get into me and poison me, because the motive, because once that gets into you, it poisons everything else. You might think, oh, just like the same way I thought I had all the anxiety and the stress covered when I was pregnant. You might think you have it covered, but your subconscious, you can't deceive your subconscious. It seeps out into the way you act, the way you talk. It seeps out into everything. And no, we don't want any of that. So yes, be content, do your best where you are right now, but still with that long-term view. If I don't know what your goals are, because I'm a big believer in setting goals and lofty goals as well. But so keep working and keep, taking the necessary steps that will get you to where you need to get to. But while you're here right now, do your very best. Do your very best. If you're working for someone, be the best employer. If you're running your business, run it with such excellence. Have great customer service. Offer quality services.
Love that. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's, it is important. You got to have that vision or that goal and multiple goals, I always say too, because it's like one of those things where you have to have, you got to, being your best here, we got to continue to know like, hey, this is where I want to go. And I'm going to do all that I can here to create that as a reality. Is there other things? So is self-talk a habit you have to monitor? Like I know that came up a little bit, like, that you're, and I know exactly how you feel, like level 4, level 20. It's like, yeah, I've been there. Like, I'm like, man, how do I look at them at 20? That's a big gap. I can't understand that. How can I get there? And then I start self-judging myself and it's like, hold on. Let's just take where I'm at. They probably have been where I'm at before. So is that a habit? Is that something you also recommend and how to monitor that? And what do you do to kind of like it? Because our brain loves to go negative. So, I mean, not loves to, it's just easier to go that route, right? It's a lot easier to look that way because your brain's always looking for what's wrong. And how do you do that? And how do you create that shift in that conversation?
That's a fantastic question because I'm such a big believer in, again, being cognizant of the words that we speak. I believe strongly that with our words, we create our world. So affirmations are such a big part of my daily discipline, my daily routine, affirmations. And because I'm sure you know this, Dr. Vic, like we talk to ourselves all the time. We talk to ourselves all the time. And if we're not, again, intentional, if we're not cognizant of the kind of things we say, a lot of it's a lot of self-defeating stuff, like, comparing ourselves to others and things like that. So just basically setting your day, like in the mornings, affirmations. I strongly believe that everyone should have a set of affirmations that they repeat to themselves daily that sort of reflects, the world that they're trying to create, basically. I'm a person of excellence. I'm disciplined. I'm a great wife. I'm a great mother. Think whatever it is for you. Whatever it is for you. Today's going to be a fantastic day. I'm graced to handle whatever comes my way today. That prepares you. And then if you do that long enough, you realize that once those negative thoughts come, and then once you find yourself dwelling on them, you quickly catch yourself. And then, you replace that with the thoughts. And sometimes it might mean you saying it out aloud. Like, because once you say it out aloud anyway, you break the thought immediately. So yes, I'm a big believer in just using your words to create the world that you want and speaking positively.
I love that. And is it, because sometimes I've had people asking and they're like, well, what if you're saying the affirmation, but in the back of that mind, that little voice is like, yeah, right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Keep saying that to yourself. How do you deal with that? Because I know that pops up from time to time.
Right. Okay. So once you're, even with the affirmations, faith without works is dead. So I don't know, whatever it is that you're believing for, if you have your set of affirmations that speak to that, you better make sure you're doing the work as well. Make sure you're doing the work. You're working towards those goals. There's no point in just saying it. It's not magic. It's not just going to happen. But make sure you're doing the work. Okay, this is one thing that I strongly, strongly believe in is this. I'd rather focus on the positive and use my words to do that than to give voice to the negative. Because this is what happens. I strongly believe that once we have a mindset, I'm talking about hope actually, because what you're doing is whenever you say those words, those affirmations, you're hoping, you're believing for a better tomorrow, and you're using your words to declare that. However, even if you get those voices of doubt, you know something, if you, yes, we can't help that, but then we have control over what we give audience to. If you choose to dwell on those voices of doubt, you just find yourself spiraling down into like an abyss where you don't want to get into. But then once you use your words to focus, to speak into that better tomorrow, use your words to declare hope for a better tomorrow. This is what happens. I've seen this in my life as well. Your subconscious, like you're telling your mind to go look for ways to make that happen, to go look for ways to, get those solutions to help you get to where you need to be, basically, as opposed to, you're giving voice to the negative. Well, that's what your subconscious is going to focus on. So I would rather use my voice to speak hope into my future. So that way I'm teaching or retraining, reconditioning my subconscious to look for ways and to steer the totality of my being to go look for ways to make those dreams, those goals, the vision come to pass.
Love that. And you're programming the subconscious mind, right? As simple as that.
Yeah.
And then once you can get there, because 95% of people are living, they're letting their subconscious mind dictate their life. So it's one of those things like, if you can get to that programming side of things, and all of a sudden now you've created a habit, right? That is now automatically looking for success, or automatically looking for whatever it is that you're programming it to be. And you may have talked about this earlier, but I wanted to ask this question. What are some, because I know you talk a lot about leadership too, and I want to make sure I discuss on that also, is what are some qualities that a successful leader should have? Like, what are and I know we probably like I said, talked a little bit about this, but I would love to ask that question and then start diving deep into that.
Right. That's a great question. And, I cover a lot of this in my book, Joab, King David's top general. I don't know if you know anything about Joab, but I get this question all the time. He's like one of the bad boys of the Bible. And everyone always goes, why do you even write about someone like that? In Joab, I saw great qualities, core values that make great leaders. And from his life story, I also saw characteristics that we need to see and steer clear from, so we don't end up the way he did and make some of the mistakes that he did. So I think the number one thing as a leader is a leader has to have a deep love for all of humanity. I know, yes, we have a lot of leaders that say that. I love learning about leaders. I think one of my favorite things to do is to read biographies about different leaders, CEOs, and all of that. I just love learning about them. And the ones that have been very successful at what they do is they have a deep love for humanity. Because it's one thing to say it, but then if you don't, if you haven't really worked on that part, your actions will say otherwise. You can say it, you can announce it to the world from now till tomorrow, but your actions will dictate otherwise. So just having a deep love for humanity. Number two, I think I touched on this briefly before. As a leader, you need to be skilled at what you do. It's not because leaders carry a huge sense of responsibility and influence. When they make decisions, it doesn't just affect them or those closest to them. Hundreds of thousands and millions. Okay. So as a leader, you want to be ensure that you're skilled at what you do. If you're not skilled at what you do, make sure you have those surrounding you, your closest advisors, make sure they are the very best that we can get in the country, in your sphere of influence. But you want to be good at really what you do. And I would say a leader should have solid core values, so that, and those core values should be such that people know what you stand for. So you don't want a leader who, again, says one thing, which, sadly we see that a lot, says one thing and then does something totally different. But you should be the kind of leader that, you've done the work, you've done the inner work. So people know what you stand for. So that even when people come to you and maybe they come to you that with maybe, I don't know, things that are so contrary to your beliefs, your core values, It's an immediate no. We're not even entertaining it in any way. It's an immediate no. I want to share a very quick example. Do we have time for that, to share a quick example? Okay, so this example is from my book, Joab, King David's Top General. So there's that famous story of, David committing adultery with Bathsheba. And then, so basically what happened is, Bathsheba gets pregnant, and David, now he's the king. This puts him in a very precarious situation because he's just impregnated the wife of one of his senior officials who's away at war defending the kingdom. So David tries different ways to try to, cover up what he's done. Everything fails. And then he resorted to murdering Uriah, Bathsheba's husband. And then the way he set it up, he told Uriah, who didn't know, he invited him back to the kingdom from the battlefield, gave him his death sentence letter, told him to take the letter back to Joab. Joab is David's second in command. Told him to take the letter back to Joab and said to Joab, position him in a place where he'll be easily killed on the battlefield. End of story. You know something? Joab was a powerful man. Joab had the ear of the king. Joab was a man of influence. Joab could stand up to the king, and we saw that in the story. But Joab didn't do anything. Joab was looking for brownie points or whatever from his boss, and he just went along with the plot to murder an innocent man. And it brings me back to this. Why did David even think it was okay to ask Joab to do that? Because he knew who Joab was. He knew that Joab would be a person that would easily do something like that because he didn't have strong core values. A leader with strong core values no one will come to him with that kind of thing. If Joab had highly defined strong core values, quality characteristics of a great leader, nobody will come to you and say, go help me kill someone. They wouldn't, even if they were having a meeting and that thought even came up, everyone there would say, oh, no, he's going to say no. Let's not even bother with him. He's going to say no. So as a leader, you have to be that kind of person. People need to know what you stand for, so they wouldn't bring rubbish your way, as I put it.
I like that. And it's, core values, I think is huge. I think everyone has to have, I call it a code, but it's like things, because if you think of like programming in a computer, when you put the code in, the code just does what it does. It's not going to go outside itself. It's going to do just that. And that's core values, right? You're saying Joab he knew that, telling him, hey, I know you're looking for brownie points, whatever it may be, instead of being like, that doesn't seem right. Like, I get that, but this is what we stand for. That's your issue. Or we know what I mean? Like, being more principle based on that. And I think I totally agree. I think leaders need to do that and show, because like in today's world, unfortunately, we don't, well, I've read a lot. I love reading about biographies on leaders and so forth. It's just because you get to see like who they really were. And then you're like, wait a minute, they're not, okay. I see a lot of characteristics that I have. Okay. All right. This is possible then. All right. And it gives me that like hope and that belief, like, all right, cool. I can achieve to that level. But yeah, getting back to that, and is there like a certain type of core value, like, or I know core values are different for everybody in a certain degree, but do you do stuff like picking out your values and saying, here's things that you should like give advice on? If you want to be excellent, you have to know what your values are and what's important to you, or something like along those lines?
Well, I mean, it depends on the individual, basically. But the one thing I will say this: make sure they are good values. Make sure, whatever values that you're setting for yourself, make sure they are good values. Because again, I think number one, just really doing the work, just looking deep within, the introspective work of knowing who you are as a leader, knowing that, like I said before, the decisions and everything that you do, it doesn't just affect you; it affects others. There's a very popular African proverb that goes something like this: when a large tree in a forest, like if you have a huge tree in an Amazon forest, for example, or say a redwood, if it falls, it doesn't just fall by itself. You don't just have, oops, it just fell. And no, it takes several other trees down with it. Because if when a large tree falls in the forest, you know that a large tree has fallen because it affects, there's damage, all around. It affects everything around it. So as a leader, you need to know that. You need to really know the people that you've been called to serve. So this is not just to serve your own selfish ambitions. You've been called to serve. You need to know the people that you've been called to serve. Like, how can I always looking for ways to better serve them? And then just, showing up as your best daily. I think it's just, you can't go wrong with that. Just showing up as your best daily. When you're not sure, or when you're not sure, when you need help, be humble enough to go seek the help. You don't know, just because you're a leader doesn't mean you know it all. Get the help that you need. And the thing with leadership is this, it's the leadership, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the leader. Leaders are the ones that make those decisions that make or break. And sometimes, when a leader takes a huge risk and it's successful, we celebrate the leader. And sadly, sometimes, they make decisions because they're fallible. They're fallible human beings too. Sometimes they make decisions, but because of the influence and the responsibility, the effect of the failure of that decision is magnified 100 times over. And I think, it's important for us to learn from that. And what we hope, because we are fallible human beings, even when we apply all the disciplines, the habits and everything, we are still prone to mistake. But what we want to do is to make, as a leader, get to that point of where you're making more and more better decisions, and fewer and fewer bad decisions. Because if you're a leader where anytime you make a big decision, it's a failure, then of course, you make decision after decision, and it's a failure. Then of course, there are a lot of deep underlying issues. Leadership is complex. Leaders are complex individuals, but just knowing who you are and just whatever core values that you determine for yourself, your organization, the people you've been called to serve, make sure they're good ones, and make sure they're for the benefit of those you've been called to serve.
I love that. I couldn't agree more with you with that. When it comes to, because this has come up a couple times now where it's like, show up to be your best. My question for you is then, what is it about people that don't do that, right? Because like, I'm in the health world, I'm in the mindset world and coaching, but when it comes to the health world, right? Like I always tell people, like when I'm talking to patients, I'm like, you kind of already know what you need to do when it comes to like eating better. I can share some tips and tricks and new science and what things, different programs and different things, but at the end of the day, you got to eat better and move better. Like that's 2 principles that are going to help change your life, and sleep better, right? That's 3. And I'm like, everybody knows this. Like there's not like, it's not rocket science, but when it comes to people actually, even though they know it, the actions don't show up. So when it comes to being your best, what are some things, 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be, didn't even know that rhymed. But long story short, what is it that would be why people don't show up being their best? What is something you think that the reason why?
It could be a variety of reasons. It could be the environment, because your environment plays a huge role too. If you're surrounded by people who just don't think maintaining a healthy lifestyle is a big deal, then eventually you'll follow suit. We know that we're the sum total of the 5 individuals that we surround ourselves with. And so that's a huge one. Your environment, the people that you surround yourself with, that's very important. Number 2, it could be like a deeper underlying issue. Is it maybe the person is suffering from depression? Because a lot of times I'm just coaching, I'm a coach, but then there are times when people do need therapy. Like I've had clients, I've said to them, like, something, I think you should explore therapy in this area. This is beyond, the scope of what I can help you with. This is beyond your business or what, like therapy, because people, for so many different reasons. And you have people as well that basically what they need to do is just tweak a few things in their lives, tweak their habits a bit here and there, and then be consistent and be committed to it, and they start to see the results. Because that's a huge one too. Because yes, we can get pumped up and learn new things, and then start to do it, but then we don't commit if we're not consistent, or if you think, oh, okay, after 2 weeks, well, I still feel the same way, and then people just give up. People give up because everyone's looking for a fast way, take this pill and then lose 10 pounds or whatever. But life doesn't work that way. You have to be committed. You have, it's a journey. You have to be committed to it. So just, again, getting their mindset to that place of where they're disciplined enough to commit to it and then see it play out over the long term. And that could be because even looking for an accountability partner. If you feel that you have a natural low motivation levels, get an accountability partner, just someone to, hold you responsible, accountable to those things that you say that you want to do. And I think finally, education as well, just really not understanding, just not knowing. So I think where you have, because knowledge is powerful. So where you see, when a person is exposed consistently to the knowledge, the information of the repercussions of their actions, good or bad, that's enough to cause them to make the necessary changes that are needed in their lives.
Humans, for some weird reason, we have to get sick and tired, get knocked on our knees, and be sick and tired of being on our knees. So eventually, that's where we make the choice. Don't ask me why it has to be that way, but most of the time, that's where our biggest inspiration comes from. Now, I couldn't agree with you more on all that. Before we wrap up, I want to be able to give the listeners a chance how they can connect with you. How can they get your book, Job, King David's Top General, all that good stuff? Please go ahead and share away.
Right. Wonderful. Well, my book, Joab, King David's Top General, it's available on Amazon, and everywhere where books are sold online, Walmart and Barnes & Noble, everywhere books are sold online. You can find that there. My website, if you go to my website, it's my full name, yinkaadegbenle.com. You'll learn more about me, and there's a whole ton of fun stuff on there. And then on the different social media platforms as well. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as Ways of Excellence. So those are places where you can find me.
And for all the listeners, I will have that in the show notes and so much more. Yinka, this was great. I love how you brought the biblical stuff there. I was born and raised a Roman Italian Catholic, read the Bible twice, but I forgot most of the stories. So it's kind of fun. I read them like 20 years ago when I was in high school. And so it was nice to hear the stories. I'm like, okay, I got to get back to the Bible and just read some of those things because it's interesting stories and you can use those for correlations and all that good stuff. So, but I appreciate the work you're doing. I love how you say people have to show up to be their best at where they are and excellence. I think that's what we need more into the world. So continue that light shining bright, and thanks for taking time to be with us.
Thank you, Dr. Vic. Thank you for having me on your show. That was such a great conversation. Thank you, and thank you so much for what you do as well. Thank you your podcast is amazing. It is amazing. So thank you for what you do, for adding such great value to the whole of humanity. So thank you.
Appreciate that.